We are now just
Did I see DeWitt Henry there for a minute?
preparing to go live. And you
Hey,
can
Gary.
tell folks
Tom
that
Daly.
we are
DeWitt.
live on YouTube.
Bob,
We are live on YouTube and it is 11:01. So shall we get this party started?
Oh, man.
I'm gonna mute everybody. So Dean, unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm not, Good morning. My name is Dean Stevens. Welcome to Community Church. I am the music director and guitar player and presently serve as fake minister. And we like to light a candle at the beginning of our service if we can. And there's the candle. Someday we'll be together, right here physically in this beautiful auditorium. I hope it'll be sooner than later, but in the meantime, we're here together in little rectangles. So enjoy it while we're together. Welcome again. This is an embarrassment of riches that we have this morning, and I'm going to be very short with the churchy stuff so I can hand it over to the Poets Theater. Let me just tell you that we have a YouTube channel that has all of these Zoom sessions all documented that you can watch. There's some phenomenal ones. Daniel Ellsberg, Chris Hedges. Last week's was just exceptional. It was Professor Richard Wolff. So check them out. And tell your friends, send the link elsewhere. That's about our past on the YouTube channel. And upcoming, we have some wonderful programs. We have a brand new newsletter that just came out celebrating a mess of things, including this morning's Poet Theater. Next week, a speaker named Carrie Gillum. She's a journalist and author, writes for Time Magazine. She wrote us a book called Monsanto Papers, and it's about a lawsuit against Monsanto that was done by a certain Lee Johnson who got very sick from working with Roundup and won an enormous settlement against Monsanto. And Lee Johnson, if able, will join us as well. Carrie Gillum, the author of Monsanto Papers, and Lee Johnson. We have a program in April also about Scott and Helen Nearing, brought to us by author Greg Jolie, one of their disciples. Scott Nearing was an enormous part of Community Church over many years. He spoke here loads of times and gave week-long seminars and is remembered dearly. And we'll hear about his sedition trial in 1919, when for opposing the World War I, he was tried for sedition. Let me tell you some more programs. Judith Woodruff is one of our members, and she's going to do a program called The Red and Green of May Day. There's also a storytellers program on May 9th. Another author named Katie Martin from Island Press, who is talking about hunger and new approaches to tackling hunger and food insecurity. We have in May a gaggle of my friends. They're a group called the Sweet Chariot Music and Arts Festival, and there should be about 20 of us, and each one of us will sing a song. It'll be quite a reunion. We meet every summer on Swans Island, Maine, for 3 days of performances and gallery exhibitions. And we didn't get to do it in last summer for obvious reasons. So that's a little preview of what's coming up. One last one. On the back of the newsletter is our program featuring Jennifer Mirapol, the granddaughter of the Rosenbergs, who will be talking about their efforts to exonerate Ethel Rosenberg. Lots of good stuff coming up here at Community Church. I want to do one last thing. It's beautiful springtime, and my back hurts from working in the garden, and I wanted to just read this song that I wrote. I'll read it as a poem, and it's about this moment in the year, and it's about mortality. I wrote it for a couple of neighbors of mine who are old Italian gardeners in their garden, and then it became about my dad, who was an old gardener who passed away about 10 years ago, and then it became about me. The song or the poem is called Old Man in His Garden. Spring again, I saw the old man in his garden, inched his rocky way down dark brown rows. And as the years and stiff joints have made it hard for him, still he's out on the first warm day and he's ready to go. Every year I see him out on that first warm day and he's ready to go. He's ready to dig, he's ready to weed, he's ready to water and ready to seed. He'll prune and clip and spade. He'll move so slowly it'll take him all day. And the next one too. Whatever gets done we'll have to do. Might be just one, might be 2 rows that he gets done today. Got to take them as they come your way. Take them one by one today. And at the end of each day I see him on his front step. Leans on his wooden cane in the last rays of sunset, and as the colors darken on a brand new garden, getting smaller every year, I will stand amazed at a man's last days as the twilight draws near. He must be thinking rain, he must be hoping sun, must be dreaming greener gardens. Is this his last one? You can see him growing slower, but the grace of a garden grower. When I am old, I want to stand out in a garden. I want to gaze on the work of my hand. When I grow tired and slow, may I rest assured that the fruit of this work is the bounty of this land. I want to leave it a better place. I want to give it more than I take. I want to go gently. I'll be thinking rain, I'll be hoping sun, I'll be dreaming greener gardens when it's my last one. You can see we're growing slower. But the grace of a garden grower. This morning, an embarrassment of poetry riches. I give you our host and MC, our friend David Gullette, who will be our MC, and I will mute myself and spotlight David. Thank you, poets, and thank you, everybody who is joining us this morning.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you to the Community Church of Boston, this wonderful institution, which is 100 years old, and it's been a shelter for radical thinkers for all that 100 years. This idea for us to have some poets, some local poets come together to read their material came from Dean Stevens. This is our the Poets Theater's third appearance at the Community Church. We presented our script called The Boston Abolitionists. We also did a wonderful presentation of younger Boston poets called Other Voices in the Room, which included, among other people, the wonderful poet Amanda Shay, who will be reading this morning. And this is the order. I'm going to give you the names, but I'm going to then introduce each one of them. The order is alphabetical by last name. First is going to be Martha Collins, then Ani Shika, then myself, then Fred Marchand, then Amanda Shay, and then Lloyd Schwartz. Everyone in that group, with the possible exception of Ani Shika, has a Poets Theater connection. The Poets Theater was founded in 1950 by a bunch of young unknown poets who later became quite well known. People like Jimmy Merrill and John Ashbery, and you may have heard the name Dylan Thomas, Richard Wilbur. And it's been going on and off ever since. And we intend to keep it alive. Our idea is that poets should feel comfortable speaking in public on a stage. They should not succumb to what we call the American poetic drone strike, but they should speak with honesty from their hearts in an ordinary tone of voice and deliver their poetry with clarity. That's what's going to happen today. Martha Collins, several years ago, published a wonderful book, a long meditative poem called Blue Front. The main incident of which was a lynching in the town of Cairo, Illinois, that it turns out, she discovered later, her father was a witness to as a boy. I recommend this wonderful book. The Blue Front, by the way, refers to the place where the Mississippi and the Ohio come together, the Ohio being cleaner and bluer than the Mississippi. These two colors run side by side until further downstream they disappear. You'll recall, by the way, in Huck Finn, that Huck and Jim, Jim's plan is that when they get to Cairo, they're going to work their way, he's going to work his way back upstream into a free state, earn enough money to buy his family back from slavery. Of course, they pass Cairo in the night, and the rest is Huck Finn history. Martha, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. I'm not going to be reading from Blue Front today, but it's a great pleasure to be reading with the Poets Theater again. It's great to be mustering with you again. And thank you, Dean Stevens and the Community Church of Boston. Because this is church, I'm going to begin with a poem called Prayer and end with one called Benediction. The prayer is the first of two poems I'll read from a chapbook I published some years ago called Gone So Far. I wrote these poems while my mother was experiencing Alzheimer's. Unlike a lot of Alzheimer's patients, she continued to be extremely articulate, no matter how confused she became. Most of the poems are in her voice, but this first tiny one is in mine. Prayer. When I am old, help me to know I am old and cannot help it. Help me to know myself when I cannot help myself. When I do not know myself, let me forget what cannot be helped. The second one from this little book is almost completely in my mother's voice. Just months before she died at the age of 99, I was sitting outside with her one afternoon and was prompted to write down everything she said. I did very little editing and discovered as I was transcribing that there were exactly 14 statements. I should note that the he that appears near the end of this poem is capitalized, as I know she would have wanted it to be. Her poem. It's all together. We're in the membership of the trees. We didn't have to have it, but we did have to have. I knew you knew it. It's here. It's everywhere. Aren't those trees delicious? They're heavenly, but they come to you. Heaven isn't anywhere else. It's here. I thought I had to have it. Well, I did. I have it. It's where it was and wanted to be. Was the moon ever so secure? Never. After I knew him, then I knew him. I am where I am. I wasn't, but I am now. The next three poems are from my most recent book, a series of poems I addressed to my husband following his death almost 5 years ago. They were all written on Cape Cod, where he and I spent time each summer and where we scattered his ashes a few months after he died. The book is called Because What Else Could I Do? But the poems are untitled, so I will just pause between them. The winding road, the bare trees. Through bare trees, the gray pond. Beside the pond, the bench where you sat. The empty bench, the still pond. Across the pond, the two white chairs. The chairs reflected where I would swim. And when I'd swum almost back in, you'd get in the water and meet me there. Paper bag with empty box with almost empty plastic bag, and on my hands and on my jeans, you, some part or parts of you from when we sent you into the sea, low tide, so you easily rode the lightest currents in tiny explosions of white. And when we finished, a sudden late sun on the water of which you were becoming a part on runnels between patches of sand, as if you were signing yourself in silver. Another beach, the last one we walked together hand in hand in the August sun, and I walked on while you rested there, and now it is winter and I am here with almost the last of you in my hand, a tiny part of some parts of you, your hand, your blue eye, shoulder, mouth. And I try to gentle you in to the sea, but a sudden wave rushes over my feet, and the wind catches this part of some parts of you, and instead you are in the air, and more than before, you are on me. You have met me again. You will not let me let you go. You are in the sea where you wanted to be, but you are also in air and sand and earth where your grandson will bury another small part. And now I lick my finger and you are in me. The next two poems are quite recent ones. The first one was written in response to an invitation the minister of my church gave a year ago, inviting us to consider the world of what he calls the more than human, starting in April. This was my response in 12 tiny sections, and it's also my only pandemic poem. Talking to my neighbors, April, May 2020. 1. Hey, you red tulip, anthers turned, pistols plumped. Good job. 2. Lucky dogs who get to take your humans for longer walks. 3. Deep purple iris not quite open, but I know what's inside. Ooh, ooh. 4. Sorry, weeds, but you'll succeed in spite of me. 5. So green, so fast, so many greens. Sycamore, it's time. 6. Ants, you're not safe in here. 7. Cardinal, thanks for the woof whistle, the red suit for letting me come so close. 8. Azalea crowds of pink, scarlet, white. No distancing for you. 9. Squirrel chases, pigeon chases, rabbit chases, squirrel, pigeon, rabbit. 10. Got my attention, tulip tree, yellow, orange, green flowers plopping on pavement. 11. Slow down, cars, squirrel imprinted on street, crushed dove. 12. Wind, you're everywhere. No wonder we say breath of God. No, wonder. And a shorter poem, my newest, called Grace, and keep that title in mind as I read the poem. Grace. Of God, yes, by the, but not there, but for the. Acts of, yes, acts of, but not a given state of. saving as divine, but can fall from. A she or one of three, full or full of. A period extended, a note just before. Something said before. Yes, before. And finally, benediction. Not a story, they said, not even a line. And there wasn't a line, there was a circle. A perfect circle, though there were breaks. But it wasn't broken, it was open. It was open in the spaces between. It was open in the spaces between them. And they were like candles giving light. But the light came from the length of their bodies. And they were like lilies that opened their throats. And as they opened, they almost touched. And they threw back their heads, and the circle widened. And there was silence, but they were singing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. I neglected to say in my brief introduction that we set Martha's book, Blue Front, into a script, and we did a sort of studio production of it over at the that wonderful theater complex over in Watertown. It was quite moving, quite moving. Anijika was a student of mine at Simmons, and then she went on to the MFA program at BU, where she worked with Rosanna Warren and Robert Pinsky and Louise Gluck. As a publisher, I published her first book of poetry with my press called Fenway Press, a wonderful book of poems called Bread Upon Running Waters. She's also a great translator of Albanian poetry into English, and her translation of the leading Albanian poet, Lulieta Leshanaku's book called Negative Space, or was it Spaces? Negative Space, was picked up by none other than New Directions, and has been widely praised on both sides of the Atlantic. So it's a great pleasure to invite Anijika, my dear friend Anijika, to read.
Thank you, David and Dean Stevens and the Community Church. Thank you so much for having me. I loved Martha's poetry. Going after her is, makes me nervous, but I just wanted to say I loved the focused attention in all the poems. Gorgeous. Thank you. So I'll read a few poems from my book, and then just one that I've written recently. I thought I'll just share, even though it's still a work in progress. So from my book, I'll start with White Noise. We sat around our small table, the balcony French doors wide open to the breeze, the flies. I could hear the neighbors above and my friend Miri chasing a tire down the street. Each family eavesdropped on the next like clockwork. My mother ladled soup in 4 bowls. I remember her white ankles taking her in and out of the kitchen, and my father never moving to help her. He liked to watch her, like I did. We sat together like this only on Sundays. Grandmother translated for us from Greek. Throw your bread on running waters, and you'll see that it comes back to you. She'd hide the book under her pillow, then finally sit down to eat. Nobody I loved was taken into the woods and shot. In the summer, I met my half-brother for the first time. His head shaved like a soldier's. He came back to us when I didn't know how to know him. At supper, my father didn't know how to help either. He made jokes about girls, then asked about his grades. When my parents visit us, I prepare a meal, pass the bread, wait for a toast, and sit quietly like my father, listening to everyone's insignificant confessions. We hardly ever talk of his son, who lives permanently away. Somehow, all absence of speech replaces his absence, or everyone's regrets, or everyone's regrets, or everything that's been thrown away. At the landing, they turn to wave goodbye, looking up at us. My father's silver head looks smaller every time I see him. The parenthesis around my mother's mouth more prominent now from withholding. My husband shuts the door. It's windy out. I part the curtains and watch them get in the car. Watch whatever is rushing against them. This next poem is titled His Wife. I was reading a biography of the poet Cesar Vallejo, and this came out of that. His Wife. In the biography section of a poetry anthology, Cesar Vallejo's ends with a note on his last works, published posthumously by his widow. By his widow, not by his wife, or by his best friend, or simply by whatever her name was. We aren't told her name. In one of the poems, Vallejo speaks of hope. He's in pain, says, if my bride were dead, my pain would be the same. My bride, not my wife, not Georgette. Again, she's unnamed. Perhaps this way no one can claim her. The woman closed the door a bride. She opened it a widow. When Vallejo wasn't there, or even when he was, what name was hers? Perfection or perfected? Interrupted? Would she need a name to recall herself? And then I'll read something that I just wrote recently. So it's Untitled. All my life I have kept quiet, and if not quiet, giggling. A kind of defense mechanism, except it didn't protect me from anything, but from the fear of my own power. What makes us raise girls afraid of themselves? Maybe only my mother raised me so. No, my mother hardly raised me. She had to raise herself through decades of surveillance, followed by decades of scrubbing floors and toilets in America, while her poetry sat on a shelf. And I raised myself in a cocoon I wove to navigate the end of the dictatorship and the path to a new language. Where are you from? Albania. Oh, is that in Russia? No, you know Italy, Greece? It's right above Greece, east of Italy, I'd explain, making sure they'd register this last fact, the civilized empire I wanted them to see me from. That I was as good as next of kin with Sofia Loren and Adriano Celentano. Except my new American friends didn't know the latter. So I would giggle to fill the silences between one explanation and the next. No one asked me, what did you love to do back home? If they'd asked me, I would have told them of my brother's stories, how I loved listening to him imitate hand grenade sounds. Yeah, badoof, from movies we'd watch of Germans occupying Albania. And afternoons when my parents were at work, I'd play grown-ups and toast him bread layered with snow white sugar, sprinkled with olive oil. We'd sit and watch Crtani films, cartoons from Yugoslav channels, biting into that sweetness and translucent green of the oil, the toast crust browning underneath it, like the contours of a city underwater we'd yet to see. Now that I think about it, I want to tell those kids, or at least that girl, that all she had to do when she'd start giggling is take a deep breath instead. Remember where she's from. The sun shines for those who open windows, not those too careful to lock their doors. And going back to the book, this little poem is titled Spring. I'm surprised by purple crocuses on the way home, and the farther I look, the more they multiply, a kind of secret reunion with family long lost, relatives whom I welcome in other forms, because it's spring and the weather is full of arrivals. I see you now, grandfather, little storm gathering in the distance. And you, Nana, a pink magnolia, the one on the very top of the tree. Welcome, Robin, my favorite uncle who wouldn't shut up. Here's afternoon, waning slowly like Aunt Pandora who'd come to visit and wouldn't leave. And hello, mother, snail crossing a sidewalk, always there before I take my next step. But the green grass, that is my father. And on the last day, he'll cover me. And this last poem is titled Lost and Found. And it came out of a time when I lived in Thailand. So I've kind of lived in different places. So I'm from Albania originally, and I worked in Thailand for a while, teaching, my first teaching job. So this was from a time when I visited a temple in a cave, which was wonderful. But it was a moment where you feel both lost and found. So lost and found. Inside a Buddhist temple, inside a cave, among tall golden statues, I feel nothing. I think of nothing. I look around, wonder if taking photographs is allowed. On their knees, eyes shut, natives and tourists rock back and forth as though straining together to give birth. I imagine a single firefly stumbling into the cave, its pulsing light rearranging space inside the mountain. On my way out, I find a scrap of blue paper on the stairs, fragments in Thai script that I can't read. I slip it in the pocket of my jeans, wondering if a monk wrote a list of things he needs. I hope it's a monk's attempt at poetry. Then I'd understand the tearing it in pieces. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Annie. I love the new poem. Looking forward to seeing that. Alphabetically, it's my turn to read. I'm going to read 3 poems. And I too have, I guess, the only COVID poem. It doesn't sound like a COVID poem, but I did write it last October. In fact, the title of the poem is October 2020, and it does have a little sense of impending doom, but let's see how it works. October 2020. Is it just my imagination, or are the clouds racing past from southwest or northwest, doesn't matter which, faster than ever? White shaft slithering, Montauk to Mount Desert. Old Tasso remarks, se ne vuole il ciel rapidamente. And he calls upon the hours to decelerate the day. Me, I sense the high patterns of air, the sky speeding up rapidamente. For several years now, more and more days, my boat confined to the dock, the sea whipped up, too rough to venture out. I don't think it's simply my age. Derek Mahon, younger than I, just died. The planet is shifting. The jet stream, berserk. Leaning over the railing, my ears cupped to hear the pre-frost garden. Up comes the choral murmur of the bees. Stock up the pantry, here it comes. I'm I grew up in North Carolina. I've become a Yankee over the last 60 years, but the next two poems have to do with North Carolina. The first one is called Everett Avenue Facing East. I have spent years shying away from this poem in which I try to capture a single gesture of my father's. This is late 1967, and a berry aneurysm has exploded in my brother's skull. So I fly down to Raleigh and spend the night in the room that became mine after our sister went off to college. Early next morning, I hear the front door open and go to the window. My father is leaving the house. I signal him to wait. We drive straight out Everett for the hospital, unspeaking. As we near Cameron Village, the sun peeks over the roof of Sears, and he takes his right hand off the wheel and palm up, lifts it toward the sun. Even as I watch him, I know there is more going on here than the world breaks our hearts and the indifferent sun simply goes on doing what it has to. More than so begins the first day without my youngest son. More than my oldest son is with me. Together we bear witness to an iron law. Dance is the art I know least, but I do love to watch a skilled dancer slowly revolve and tilt his torso and lift a hand to make a gesture toward that other dancer across the stage. And if you ask me to tell you what that hand is saying, I was right to dread this poem. The final poem is a little longer. It takes place in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where I was getting my PhD back in the day, back in the 60s. There are a couple of names that come up in this poem. I'm going to give you a little head start, a little note about names that you might not recognize. The name Kay Kaiser. Kay Kaiser was a famous band leader, jazz band leader in the 40s and the war years and after. He was a North Carolinian, and he ended up retiring to Chapel Hill and lived across the street from the house that you'll hear about in the poem. Betty Smith, the author of a very famous book called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. My high school friend Macon became known as Captain Offset because offset is a form of free digital printing, and he was an expert in that, as you'll learn. Jill or Jilly comes up in the poem. It's a big, shaggy, smelly black dog, a darling dog. Luther Hodges was the former governor of North Carolina, and he was in John F. Kennedy's cabinet, I think as Secretary of Commerce. Finally, Scuppernong is a type of wild grape which you find growing in trees all over North Carolina. The poem is called Orange County Blues, Chapel Hill, early 60s. Well, we had half of the top of a big house on Franklin Street, and we were barely past mid-century. And in the morning, I cranked up like as not some Mozart, maybe late concerto 23 or 24, or maybe Rameau's bird songs on the tinkle box, as the maple next to Kay Kaiser's turned red-necked, red-flanked, every day bloodier, stained like a stool the morning after beats. Or we sailed past Betty Smith's, stoned on week old homebrew we had skimmed the yellow jackets from. Opaque and turbulent, priceless glop that gave a high we called Swiss engine for the hum behind the forehead. Vagrants adrift in a neighborhood of names we had heard as bombs fell through our blankets, relics of superannuated fame. Buster charcoaled boobs or kicked Jilly under the bed, rising in a bourbon rage to shape the thighs and pubic rise of dream women clothed in magic flesh, gold and silken red, on 20 canvases nonstop until the last day, off the balcony they went, and he pursuing with his little axe to chop the bitches into tatters. Then home came Captain Offset from the Carborough print shop, where he had worked his one day out of 6. Such skill he left his bosses reeling, speed and grace and nothing spilt, and strode through the blue door, brandishing a paycheck that could feed us for a month, or flashed his self-made calling cards in Dookie Gothic. Offset cares. Verso Shazoom. We turned the Morris Minor on its side to look for fleas, and Jilly pissed on the windshield. Then we passed on into Battle Woods, where Offset kept his dope ranch in the gully out behind Luther Hodges' lawn. His wife went up in flames, you know, spinning in her nightie. Ah, always too late we wrap love in our blankets. His theme once sung, the wood thrush, paused to cogitate some vaguely Slavic variation as Buster Tarzaned out over the creek on the Scuppernong's shaggy liana, which didn't exactly break so much as come unhooked and slither down the sky. The ankle popped. Jill was all slobber. We leaned back, smoked some rope, and spoke of fathers. I said, "You were all set to drive to Clayton and blow his brains out. I hid your keys. Where did you find that gun? I've never seen you drunker." "Worst thing you ever did, stopping me," said Buster, passing the pipe. And Offset. "Mine passed through town a week, 2 weeks ago, bought me coffee, donut, never called my mother, a scarecrow, ghost, shacked up with some waitress in Pasadena." And mine, I said, loves to praise greatness, but denies it to himself, talks a high culture game, the best that has been thought and said, but mainly just drinks and doubts his powers. When he writes a letter, it's as though an angel, or better yet, an E.B. White, had strummed the strings. And yet 2 mini book reviews a decade is all he has to show for that buried life. Then Buster disappeared, and Tosh moved in to groan with joy in Offset's arms and weep when he walked away. I sweated Anglo-Saxon scansion with some dapper martinet and prayed for spring, which came and brought our demolition notice. Buster and Jill came back for the last big party. Randy, across the hall, bedded his last wan boy while Offset crooned, I wanna hold your gland. But Randy had built too big a fire. The coals ignited the floor beams underneath the hearth, so that the fireman had to hack a hole clean through the floor, so that the widow below stood gaping up at a circle of smoky men and clutched her house dress to her trembling throat. We jammed with fiddle, mandolin, and drum, and made some coffee and brought in the dawn. I married and began a different life. Buster went west. Offset went off toward India for drugs. I got a postcard. Bangkok's floating markets. Streets flooded. Please advise. I was not drafted and the war slogged on. The house was smashed and beaten flat. A library stands there now. This song is done. Maybe someday it will be sung there on that plot of consecrated ground. Thank you. Now, Fred Marchand. Are you ready, Fred?
I am ready. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good.
Fred's connection with the Poets Theater goes back many years. He was involved with a wonderful anthology called Writing Between the Lines, which was writing about the Vietnam War by combatants and non-combatants on both sides, including North Vietnamese tank commanders and international health workers. And Poets Theater did a staged production based on that anthology, in which the great Grace Paley was in the cast. Fred is, I think, the only member of the United States military ever to get conscientious objector status while in uniform. It's another story which you can hear from him. But Fred, it's a great pleasure to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Thank you all. Thank you very much to the Community Church of Boston and to my fellow readers. What a pleasure and privilege to be with you. I'm going to make one slight historical, I feel obligated to make a slight historical correction there, David. There actually is in the United States military procedures for leaving as a conscientious objector. And I wasn't the only one. I was, at the time, back in 1970, I think I was the first or second Marine officer to be honorably discharged as a CO. That was I haven't clarified that to this day, who was first, but nonetheless, it was one of the few early ones during the years of the Vietnam War. But thank you for the introduction, truly. And that was a great moment in the history of the Poets Theater, I think, that Writing Between the Lines stage performance, stage reading. And I'm going to begin with some thoughts about this time. I love this time. I was wondering why does this time for poetry reading appeal to me so? Well, I am a long ago Catholic. And 11 o'clock in the morning on Sunday is high mass somewhere deep in the back of my mind. And there's nothing I can do about it. However, I have a kind of ecumenical sense I looked at some poems with an ecumenical sense, we'll put it that way. The first one is called Call to Prayer. Call to prayer. It begins in what one imagines as desert, but is nothing empty. For a second or two, the air hints at the night it has risen from. Then the call passes from voice to voice, saying, "This is yours. Take it on to the next." As if these words were waves in a storm, each gaining on the other, growing stronger when they touch. The song overtaking dawn at the rim of the valley, just before the words enter the old city by the gates of reason, finding the byways piled high with what no one believes in anymore. Stray cats arching their backs when they hear it, cry out in pain. We throw open the gate, the green metal shutters, and try to listen once again. This poem was begun a year ago, and I don't know, it doesn't feel like a poem about the pandemic, but it was begun a year ago, and you'll hear it. It's set. It's a reflection back on a Benedictine abbey that I visited right after I get out of the military, actually, that long ago. Benedictine abbey in France called Solesmes, and it's a place where the monks in their chant are supposed to be the absolutely most faithful and purest version of that's funny, of Gregorian chant. This is my American version of Gregorian chant. It's called Solesmes. Time for a cardinal to perch in our locust and sing the evening song. The neighbor's bronze-hued cat peeks around the corner, wonders what I am and what I would do if it dares to place the next paw down. A slanting spring sunlight has reached every corner of my yard, and the green feeling of all that returns, brings me back to a dawn mass in the chapel of the abbey. The morning prayers curling like incense as they rise toward heaven, and a deity the monks believe cannot help but listen. And remembering their song in these, the first weeks of our affliction, I do too. This poem's called Vigil. It was a reflection on something long, long ago in my life. My mother's passing away, actually. There's sort of a negative way in which, that people can't, in the COVID pandemic, people don't have vigils exactly. They have video vigils. In any case, Vigil. Over at last and gone, the body that was belongs now to no one. Palpable absence, unequivocally arrived. The sheer lack of ambiguity in the moment takes your breath away. You feel almost grateful for what loss might be able to teach you, handing you over hostage to a regime ruled by the lords of the real. You sit and marvel at how quickly you feel a keen admiration for the literal, and how metaphors make you smile as they sneak into your thought and seem almost a calculated posture when compared to the dim warmth in the hand you still hold until you place it down gently, thinking how gently does not matter anymore. And you note the bedrail, the proud embossed medallion. You note the fluorescent that shines upon it and the face that has begun to look like a mask. And you think, you imagine, you wish that before the soul floats up and out and will hover at the sealed window, you hope it would touch you once before leaving the airless room where kindness has invited you in and asked if you'd like to have a few minutes alone. Anyone who's driven to Provincetown knows that on the right-hand side of Route 6, so up in Easton toward Wellfleet, is the national park little place called Pilgrim Spring, a place where the pilgrims, were pulled in first, and they were looking for some fresh water. Pilgrim Spring. It's not where you think it is. It's not even where the map says it should be. Though you've been here many times before, you still don't know where it is. You walk down gravel winter paths and listen to a scrub oak talking dead talk with frozen leaves and seagrass. The icy winter dunes and an end of days sky, while a small hiding creature stirs as you pass. And you think it just might guide you to the place where you can kneel and sip trying to take in what the spring offers. The broken arms, the lost lives reaching up from under the frozen ground you walk on, in the history hidden in the sweet water welling up somewhere around here, out on the farthest edge of who we as a nation and a people are. This poem doesn't have quite that religious aura, but I will tell you, it does. The background of it does. I was really privileged a few years ago to edit the early poetry of William Stafford. William Stafford, poet of the later half of the last century, himself a conscientious objector during World War II, and actually those early poems were the part of his civilian public service era in his life. In any case, I was in the archives and when I was working on this, and I fell asleep and had a dream, kind of. I mean, dreams like this, you sort of tend to work with them later, and you're making them up half. But suffice it to say, I did doze off, and I did have a dream. This is called Trout, and it's a dream in the William Stafford archives. I'm in the cellar where everything is kept. The spiky, handwritten drafts and put-togethers. Manila folders he stapled into booklets. The photos of poets in flat gray archival boxes. His letters climbing out of their files everywhere when I find, I have been looking for it, the first letter I wrote to him decades ago, and his gracious note in return. Carbon copy that as I read it again makes me feel as if his hand is on my arm. And I hear him speak softly, though I know what I hear is as much or only a better part of myself. We could be like trout, holding steady in the onrushing stream. And as this is where we have chosen to live, we will have to open our eyes and face what the words bring us. Be grateful for the stones beneath and what little we can see of the sky and forests above. Now that we know who we are and what we hope to do, there is no reason anymore to hurry. The poem says, in order to survive in this place, we will need to learn first how to breathe underwater. Pinckney Street in Boston. Pinckney Street. A view from the crest of Boston to the river. A walk, and my friend stopping to say that for 3 weeks each year and beginning tomorrow, this will be the most beautiful place in the city. Our respite in the brick-faced buildings, blushing in sunlight, in star magnolias swelling, about to burst into bright badges, medallions of tangible life and light. The shook foil the Irish poet wrote about, the minutes we have of grandeur, hope, and gratitude. And I'm going to end on a poem that I actually hadn't thought of until we sat down together today as part of it. And I'm glad I had it nearby. And it's something that actually that Martha Collins knows well. It goes back to our first visit to Vietnam in 1994 in winter. And we were, among many things we were doing, Martha was finishing a translation project, and we were with many Vietnamese writers. And some of them were always so generous as to take us to many of the local temples. Well, this was a really important temple, a poet's temple. Nguyen Chai was a poet from the 14th century and really one of the persons who began poetry in the vernacular in Vietnam. And he had a retreat in the mountains, and And to get to where he retreated, you have to go through a temple. So this is a poem, and I'll end with this one, with grave thanks for all. Rows of Buddhas receding at the temple of Munchai. Into the room of carved wooden statues, skin painted gold, robes a deep violet, sometimes a saffron sash, 3 or 4 Buddhas across, rising and receding to the largest floating on a carved lotus. An incense ring drifting back down the stepped rows, as if prayers that had carried had been heard by the past rectors and teachers. Each of them in a guise or posture, curved fingers measuring a magnitude at the center of a spinning aortal wheel, where nothing breathes, or sounds, or is. Go past the funerary urns, the guardians of the poet's sleep, his ashes scattered over pine needles and clay, which cling to the shoe, while a deer somewhere above you, with its nubbed black horns in its ears, bailing the sweet air, lowers its muzzle to a spring under rows of pines, rising and receding, upward, each of them a Buddha unto itself, a teacher, a discipline, a silence, composing the dream of each of us all over again. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Wonderful. Our next reader is Amanda Shay. When the Poets Theater a couple of years ago was touring around Eastern Massachusetts with our show called The Boston Abolitionists, we had a wonderful gig up in the much neglected but wonderful city of Lynn, Massachusetts, north of Boston. And we were actually videotaping our performance in the Lynn cable television studios. And when it was over, we had a very good show. And when it was over, we were standing in the parking lot, and this beautiful young woman came up and said, "I love what you're doing. How can I be part of your work? I'm a poet myself." We said, "Oh, really? Let me show you," she said. And she burst into this recitation of a poem about herself. And we were just blown away. And we've tried everything since to get her involved, including our last Poets Theater production at the community church was a show we sort of generally named Other Voices in the Room. It involved younger poets from places like Dorchester and Roxbury. And Amanda really pulled that show together. She pulled the cast together. It was her baby, and it was one of the high points of our season. In fact, one of the high points of our existence as a theater. So Amanda, it's with great pleasure that I invite you to take the floor.
Hey, everybody. Wow, what an intro. I was super nervous before, but I'm super nervous now. But welcome, everyone. Thank you again for having me. I love the community church. As David had said, we did an amazing show there. And we also did something at Boston Athenaeum together too with the Poets Theater, which are near and dear to my heart. So I'm just like super happy to be here. There's a lot of us in here as well. So I'm just gonna take off the speaker view on my Zoom so I'm not looking at myself, because that's just gonna make me feel even more nervous. Then I could see everybody's beautiful faces. I can't see who's on page 2 or page 3, so I apologize. There's a lot of people in here, and hello to YouTube family, because I just popped over there and there's some people watching live with us too. So this is just beautiful. Can you tell I'm nervous because I did all my research before I actually came on? Okay. Essentially, I was just going to come on here and read all of my heart and bleed all over this Zoom for you all. But after hearing Martha and everybody performing, and Fred, and your words, everybody's words have just resonated so well with me today and touched me. So I'm going to give a little bit of background of my pieces before I go into them. I also realize that it is Sunday morning. And some of my poetry can be a little triggering. It's not as such as vulgarity as it is in content. So I do want to put out a trigger warning prior to me doing any of my pieces today, just so that you are aware that there is some content that's a little heavy and may feel uncomfortable or may make you feel uncomfortable. I will say before each one, like this is something that is a trigger warning and what explicitly it speaks to, just so that I'm in respect of everyone. If you need to step away or turn off your camera, I am not offended. I just don't want to trigger you. Cool. So first and foremost, my name is Amanda Shay. I've been doing poetry for a little while now, and with this reading, it's going to be some tough stuff. I am a Black queer woman, and I live in Boston. So some of my material is going to be about racism and what my experience of racism has been as a Black queer woman. It will be some stories of coming out or lack thereof, having a coming out story. I do represent the LGBTQIA community, so I do want to make that very clear. And also just some trauma-filled things, especially speaking into generational trauma. But I am going to start off with a beautiful piece that I wrote about my mom, and to all Black and brown women all around the world. It is called Resilience. No trigger warning needed for this one. The saying goes, when the tough get going, the going get tough. Must not have met my mother. The scars she bears are invisible. Only those with the third eye could see. You see, her body is strong, agile, but weakened by her experiences. Black women are to only be strong, no complaints, no check-ins, only checkups to ensure the body is intact. Heavy the head who wears the crown, but I see it slipping. Weight on her shoulders, she carries worlds around. We simply orbit in her universe, even when she's lost in her own space. Who will carry her burdens? I mean, her anger, her depression, her bipolar, her wallet. She don't need no man, but society's price tags tells her different stories. Fairy tales unbeknownst to her, for she's a dollar in a dream mentality. Don't worry, I got this swag. I can do bad all by myself, no 2 cents to rub together, but rubbed out meals. Who will nourish her soul? It's tired, been beaten, but not by life, by family who cast her away, didn't want to help her rewrite her wrongs, running away from generational trauma. She's out of breath. Panic attacks her nervous system. Like a baby she births, she still soothes. Resilient. Black and brown women overcome so many obstacles. And when asked, how are you? They reply, my mother replies, I reply, I'm fine. So that was Resilience. I encourage you all, if you can and are able-bodied, to snap if you can, or use the emojis on the Zoom. I will show you right now. You can give me a thumbs up, see on my screen there. You can wave your hand, hi, or you could even give me a heart emoji. I know that we're on Zoom and everybody is muted, but I encourage us all to use the functions that we have to encourage each other. Yes, I see some faces that are smiling. Yes, you can find that function right at the bottom of your screen. It will be laid right out. For those of you who are on the phone, there will be 3 dots. You might want to just click those 3 dots and then it will pop right up. I could see some people doing the aha moment, so I will let you finish finding that. That was Resilience. The next one I'm going to do is called Social Media. I wrote this once the world kind of closed down from COVID-19, because we are still very much in a pandemic. And I don't know about a lot of people, but what I can say for myself is that I've completely went through some mental health issues regarding the pandemic. listening to some of the stories of friends and artists who were losing gigs and people just struggling and some people not qualifying for unemployment and finding food services, it was really a lot. But one thing I did notice that was full circle was the internet, and people were using social media to stay connected. However, as we can see with all systems, not all the time are systems set up to necessarily just promote positivity. We can also promote negativity. So this is called social media, and just from my standpoint, what I've seen. Social media traps. Got you losing reality, didn't subscribe to desensitization, confusion, fake news, and all these comments. How do I cancel it? Before it cancels me, I thought this was a tool. Instead, I'm being drilled at, picked at, and screwed over my thoughts, images, in my image. When did this become high school? Snubbed for prom queen, the snob always wins, subbed in statuses. I remember the bathroom stalls marked up. Now it's bodies, not like the subways in Harlem, actual bodies. Everyone wants to be a Barb and join a team. I still have PTSD. Watching George Floyd's death changed me, triggered me. How many triggers can be pulled without having to count the bullets? Brianna can't tell us. The neighbor's walls speak louder than her voice. Another Black woman silenced in the dead of night. Protect Black women is a hashtag. We are conditioned to put a pound sign on tragedies. Maybe it should be a stop sign. Bright red so it can be read and not just seen, but we read people for filth. Full of negativity, questioning myself, my vibration is low. Too slow to tap, tap, tap in on the bigger picture. Waves of hate can penetrate even the deepest of waters. With a 30-second soundbite, click, then debate. It's faster than a chamber. Why aren't these monitored? How long is a Facebook jail sentence anyway? Is this reality or a social experiment? A play of sorts, where you can be whatever character while being judged on your character. I hate it in this world. I lucid dream often, traveling vividly, opening portals that allow me to feel safe, where accountability and evolution meet. The dark web doesn't lurk here. It's too busy trafficking children and women in this realm. I'm surrounded by my own shadows. We don't play games. We go hard at work to build capes so big made of Teflon, no cap. Shells would bounce off. No puncture wounds or sharpened tongues could pierce me. I'd be at peace instead of overthinking about content. I'd be content with self. My emotions couldn't be altered by the pretentious constructs of how to be, live, and breathe. Competition and comparisons creates divisions, common denominators. Calling people out instead of calling them in. DMs replaces conversations. No need to be direct. No desire to hit someone's line. People blogging, gossiping, rumors, unhealthy consumption, adopting trends that lose weight. Momentum dies, but not suicidal thoughts. Constant battles, turmoil from turning to devices. Addicted, it's a vice that releases hormones that causes the body to react. Twitter figures racing like heartbeats, perpetuating ideologies of a system set up to destroy confidence in feelings. And guess what? It all comes at a price. You can't buy self-esteem from an ad or an app, but if you show ID, you can be verified. Blue check marks is your validation. Unlocking id. All of us have super egos. We got to keep our egos balanced. We got to take breaks and fast. That's social media. Thank you all. Ooh, I could see y'all snapping and stuff and clapping and emojis, and you all are beautiful. The first screen of you people, I can't see the second or the third, but I'm pretty sure you all are just as beautiful. That was social media. I am going to go into a piece that I just wrote. And actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that. This is the beauty of artistry. Sometimes we get moved. So I have had the pleasure of taking my poems and being able to record them on wax. featured on other people's albums and EPs. So it's been a beautiful blessing. I encourage anybody who's an artist here on this Zoom to never stop dreaming and never stop like recreating something you've already created, because you just never know what type of art medium discipline that is near and dear to you can lead to other art forms. So this is a poem that I did for my friend Photo. He's a hip hop artist, and it's called God's Gift to Earth. Artists are so dramatic when clearing their throat. I assure you, I just have a little frog. It's not for dramatic effect. I know we're called the Poets Theater. Okay. Gift of Gab, God's plan. The natural ability to unapologetically tell my truths, my journey. No matter how ugly, light shines through. Padded walls encased, protect me from imposters, the syndrome I suffer from. Ancestors like, bruh, whispering encouragement through the leaves of our roots. Words are spells, generational curses, cursing every day to declare my own testimony. Gospel, welcome to my congregation, where my pen draws out all of my traumas. No need to pull me into the pulpit. I pen my own liberation to help my brothers and sisters heal. Yeah, it's written, destined, God's gift, one of the greatest blessings on earth. That's God's gift to earth. This next piece is called Coming Out. Thank you, Stephen. I see you still clapping. Thank you so much. And Amy, your smile is so beautiful. Thank you. You all are beautiful. I see you, Uncle Bruce. I see you. This is called Coming Out. I realized that, trans lives matter, period. And what I've been seeing on the news in relation to them being brutally beaten, abused, harassed, discarded, murdered, it made me go inward and think, I've never had to necessarily come out to my family. Even though I have a tough relationship with my father, who is very homophobic. I never felt that from my mom. So I never understood what it felt like necessarily to not feel seen and not be able to be who you truly are on the inside and the outside. So with that being said, this prompted me to think about my story. So this is called Coming Out. I don't have a coming out story. My mother taught me to love unconditionally, so I do. Understanding that my expectations of love may not come back to me. Instead, I lived my life, got married, had kids. No one questioned my queerness until my mid-30s. I roam the streets with a woman who smiles, open doors, until they see her hand in mine. The instant fetishization of lesbian couples from cis hetero men. I never felt it before. I knew she did. She has no choice but to wear her queerness on the outside, mine, buried under my light skin privilege and feminine presenting gear, my masculinity on the inside. I feel people trying to figure out like what's going on. Like if we divide Amanda's appearance and multiply her by her 2 children, it must equate to straight. But lines are blurred. They want to comprehend, not realizing that there's more to a body than a gender, than a box that gets checked before it's even open, before I could say my name with life or a dead name. I'm judged. I wasn't even confident labeling myself queer. Can you imagine? losing yourself within your identity because society tells you that's the only way you can exist, but it's a lie. Trans lives matter. As soon as I proclaim myself, pages get torn out, examined closely, then written over, because somehow claiming my own journey isn't my own narrative. Authors exist everywhere. They don't need to read you to verbally dismiss you, even when you're in bold letters coming out. I think that's my time. Has it been 10 minutes, David? Can you give me like a thumbs up? Okay, it's been 10 minutes. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm just honored to join y'all this morning. Thank you, thank you. Please use the emojis. If you want to find me, you can find me at amandashea.com. That's Shay, SHEA, like the butter for all my melanated peoples. And yeah, thank you all for sharing this space, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you, Amanda. Lovely, lovely new material. Our final reader is Lloyd Schwartz, Fable to Song and Story. When Lloyd's first book of poetry came out, which is called These People, we did, the Poets Theater did a kind of dramatic presentation of the book at a little theater down at the foot of Beacon Hill. So, was it a church? I forgot exactly where it was. Down where Kevin White used to live. That's how long ago it was. Anyhow, Lloyd has been a dear friend, not just for the Poets Theater. He and I were also involved in the early years of Plowshares magazine. He's also been an actor. He and I have appeared on stage together. So we have a long, wonderful history. Lloyd, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Dean, Charlie, Community Church. This is a very hard reading to come at the end of, because I am just crazy about you personally and all your work. David mentioned, this is unofficially titled A Murmuration of Spring. And I was thinking about what I could read that has something to do with spring. And I'm thinking music, song, dance. So I picked a bunch of poems, some of my own, one or two not of my own, that had to do with not exactly spring, but singing and dancing and music. And I'm going to start with a translation of a poem by the great Brazilian poet Carlos Drummond de Andrade. And it's a poem that I discovered on the Brazilian 50 Cruzados note. Was the Brazilian equivalent of the dollar bill. And they actually had this entire poem printed on that bill. It's called Friendly Song. I'm working on a song in which my own mother sees her image. Everyone's mother sees her image, and it speaks. It speaks just like two eyes. I'm traveling along a roadway that winds through many countries. My old friends, if they don't see me, I see them. I see and salute them. I am giving away a secret, like someone who loves or smiles. In the most natural way, two caresses reach each other. My whole life, all of our lives, make up a single diamond. I've learned a few new phrases and to make others better. I'm working on a song that wakes men up and lets children sleep. Another poem, this is not my poem, but it's a poem by Elizabeth Bishop that she never published during her lifetime. It's a love poem and I love it, and it's called Breakfast Song. My love, my saving grace, your eyes are awfully blue. I kiss your funny face, your coffee-flavored mouth. Last night I slept with you. Today I love you so. How can I bear to go as soon I must, I know, to bed with ugly death in that cold, filthy place, to sleep there without you, without the easy breath and lifelong, limb-long warmth I've grown accustomed to. Nobody wants to die. Tell me it is a lie. But no, I know it's true. It's just the common case. There's nothing one can do. My love, my saving grace, your eyes are awfully blue, early and instant blue. And this is a poem of my own called Song. Rain on the lake, room at the lodge, alone in a room in the lazy light. Loons on the lake, geese in the air, moose in the woods, aware, awake. A cry dislodged from the musty woods, the gamey musk of the one aroused. The roaming moose, the rooms lit up, the woods awake in the loony light. The moon dislodged, the lake aflame, the muse amazed, amused, aroused. Well, there's a little story behind this poem. The Boston composer, Cambridge composer John Harbison, was commissioned by the Metropolitan Opera to write an opera based on The Great Gatsby. And the Met wouldn't let him write his own libretto. So for a moment, John Harbison asked me to write the libretto for The Great Gatsby. And I started with one of the things he wanted in the opera was a series of popular or imitations of popular songs from the era of the Great Gatsby. And the first part of the libretto that I wrote was a song, one of those popular songs, at which point the Met changed its mind and allowed John to write his own libretto. So I was the librettist for John Harbison's The Great Gatsby for a very short time. But I wrote this poem, which never made it into the opera, but then John set it to music afterwards. So, it's called, so you have to imagine that it's a kind of 1920s popular song, and it's called Dreams, Gatsby's Begin. Strange, strange as it seems, You're in my dreams, still in my dreams. Day turns to night, and every night you fill my dreams. How I toss and turn, will I ever learn? Does my love deserve all this pain? My heart's atop. When will it stop? Do you, don't you, will you, won't you drive me insane? Strange as it seems, you're in my dreams. You're still in my dreams. Late every night, I put out the light so I can dream. Begin songs, dances. This is another dance, and it's in the voice of my mother. It's called Her Waltz. This is my dream. I'm dancing. Do you know how to dance? Do you like to dance? Waltzing. It's like electricity. It hurts when I walk. So I pick up a chair and I start to waltz. I look in the mirror and there I am, dancing with a chair. I say to the mirror, I'm not so old. But the mirror says, yes, you are. You're old. You're nearly 90 years old. What are you doing waltzing around with a chair? Now, isn't that silly? An old lady. This is my dream. I see myself in the mirror, waltzing with a chair. And that's the end of my dream. I once knew how to dance. I once knew how to waltz. And now I shall bid you good night. And I've got another dance poem, also waltz, called La Valse. And it begins with a one-line epigraph written by Frank Bedart, who says, freedom ends or starts with a funeral. Death sails into the gilded ballroom in purple satin, as revealing as it is liberating. Black ostrich plumes at her hip, reaching secretly out to each dancer waltzing by. Long black gloves. What freedom, what theater. Her feathers tickling the legs and rumps of the previously mirthless company, stuck in their ordinary, unadventurous, if not entirely bourgeois histories. Suddenly, the whole room comes alive. Everyone feels it. That instant exhilaration, relaxation, absence of tension and fear. The muscles in their faces relocating into smiles. Their breath exhaling sighs of pleasure. Their daily rhythms revised. Isn't she at this moment a work of art? Lifting lives out of the commonplace, offering all too rare possibilities, insights. Are we grateful to have this moment of intensity, of momentary pleasure, grazed by the pain of its very momentariness? How swiftly she swirls by us. How easily the dance changes color. How eagerly We flee these enchanting dancers for the usual warmongers, pickpockets, and enchanting murderers. And I will end with the newest poem in this little set of poems. How can I not end with a rehearsal? And this is a poem based on a book by John Harbison called "What Do We Make of Bach?" And it's called The Rehearsal. At our first duo rehearsal, Bach's B minor sonata was what we played. I already knew this young woman interested me. We borrowed a room. Where was it? With a harpsichord. Whose? And with a few words began the sonata. As this unfolded, recognition, confirmation, accord, consternation. Above all, the marking of a common center. She had told me Bach was her favorite composer, her home site. But by the end of the first movement, I knew that in her case, this was not just devotion to the music. Its spirit, its generosity, but a trust in it, a willingness to let it speak. What I heard at the same time in that first movement is the loneliness that often inhabits the undertone of a great master's work. The habitation of a realm so rarely visited with so little company. To find that secret in music, the performer needs an inner life, a kind of solitary experience. I sensed a person for whom art costs too much, for whom the sharing of that intense experience with others is often painful and risky. I knew what that might be like. I sensed joy, possibility, danger, complication, inextricability, a fulcrum, a magnet, a talisman. We began the second movement. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. Thank you to all our readers. What an inspiring hour and a half we spent together. Dean, we hope the church invites us back soon. We've got lots of other poets lined up who are dying to take part in
Sooner
such a
the better.
murmuration, such a mustering of poets.
Just turn this into a poetry church.
Absolutely. Why not? Why not?
Poetry every day, all day.
All day, every day.
Sounds
Yeah,
good to me. Except there's music and politics and dance and theater and storytelling too.
Storytelling. I was struck by how much of this was about family, about mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, close friends, children. So we're all one big family of poets, and we want to come back to the community church for another Sunday brunch.
I believe you've passed the audition.
Excellent. Thanks so much to everyone who participated. Thanks for the folks who dropped in to listen. Dean tells me that this will be on the Community Church YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's called Community Church of Boston Official.
Official, okay. Community Church of Boston Official. So you can revel in it. You can turn it on and go to sleep with it. You can wake up with it first thing in the morning.
Yes, yes.
Lovely,
Thank
lovely
you,
work, poets.
all of you. Amanda Shay, David Goulet, Martha Collins, Lloyd Schwartz, Fred Marchand, and Annie Kajika. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. And thank you to all 50 of you who are on this Zoom call and the rest of you on the YouTube live stream. It's really been fun having you, and we hope to see you again. We have a bunch of great programs coming up. I leave you with this basket. This is a basket that we use to take a collection around the physical audience when we have one, but we don't. So there is an address in the chat through which you can send us a paper check. There is also a website, communitychurchofboston.org, through which you can send us your help through PayPal or through a credit card. And also in this basket is a little bit of spring for you. It's the symbol of Easter and the symbol of new life. Eggs from a beach that I go to that is really good at creating eggs. And here's some ceramic ones that came from Boomerangs, my favorite place in Boston, the thrift shop. Here's a wooden one, and here's a painted one. Just wanted to share that with you to show you what was in this collection basket today. And I guess we're almost ready to declare the meeting over. Have a wonderful week, everybody. And I want to thank David for putting this together, for bringing these wonderful artists of the spoken word to us at Community Church. I want to also show you in the background that our beloved Bill Alberts is in a photo that he passed recently. We're remembering Bill. There is also on our YouTube channel a little remembrance that we had, a musical remembrance yesterday with Bill's favorite musicians who go back 30 years with Community Church. Their names are Joan Faber and Jeff Brewer. You can check that out on our channel. And I want to go out with my favorite thing at home right now. It's a birdie.
February 27th. She's singing, he's singing.
You remember Robert J. Lurtzema and the Birds in the Morning?
Yes, right.
That's how we're going to end it. At this age, I've suddenly become obsessed with bird song, and it's just all around where we live, and it's one of the joys of life is birds. Long may they live. Meeting at the building, soon be over, all over this world, by God, all over this world. Meeting at the building, soon be over, all over this world. Have a great week, do good work, keep in touch, make progress, and we'll see you next week or the next time we see you, okay? Love you all.
Love you all.